Today's episode is mental.
I'm a clinical psychotherapist.
And when do you know you should actually seek for help?
I'll start by defining what trauma is.
Are we trying to say that everyone has that in them?
We don't often think about it. It just kind of happens.
Wow. Okay.
It's very person specific. Relationships are typically where we experience the most trauma.
Let's move on to red flags.
He says something and then you just flip.
How can someone cope when they're being ghosted in a relationship or when a relationship comes to an end?
Move on with it. If your friend were to talk to you the way you talk to yourself, would you still be friends with them?
What is the vision behind it and why are you passionate about it?
I started to see the treatment gap that existed in the quality of care in Nigeria, and so I wanted to do something about it. Being all that God has called me to be, walking in my own lane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Today's episode is mental. I'm sure you're thinking, what do you mean by mental? It's very, 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 very important for us to take care of our minds and for us to take care of our mental health. And that's why we brought on a fantastic guest today. And we're just talking about how I would love to find out more about her. But I want to know during the interview because I'm very intrigued and interested. So thank you so much for joining us today, FUNMTO OGUNBANWO. We appreciate you. And we love the fact that you decided to spend this time with us on the podcast and share your insights and your vision. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So we're just discussing, vision to vision, visionary to visionary, different ideas and why you heard my side, but I would love to hear your side about your company EBIO.
Yes,
I got it right.
Yes,
EBIO.
Yes.
What is the story behind it? What is what birthed EBIO and what is the vision behind it and why are you passionate about it?
Okay, I'm a clinical psychotherapist and I'm the lead therapist and founder at EBIO Therapy and Wellness. So the story behind EBIO would have to go back to a bit of my story. And my decision to study psychology and even just focus on that field. So when I was in SS2, my secondary school at the time, we had to do a 2-week internship during Easter break. I don't know if they still do it now, but I had to do that and I interned at a radio station. And I really enjoyed my time. I actually got to work with the late Tosin Buckner. It was amazing. And it was a great experience. And then after that, I started to ask myself, can I do this full time? And the answer was no. So then I started to think, okay, what are the things that I enjoy doing? What are the things that come naturally to me? And I reflected and found that, amongst my friend group, I was usually the one that they would come to for advice. And, I liked listening to people. So I then decided to study psychology.
Okay.
Now, thankfully, my parents are very supportive. There wasn't any pushback or anything. Their own was just do it well, do it excellently. And so I had the opportunity to study psychology for my first degree. And then during my first degree, I really started to see just the treatment gap that existed. So I got my first degree from Austin College, which is in Texas. And so I started to see the treatment gap that existed in the quality of care in Nigeria and the US. And then also within the US, within the Black community as a whole. And so I wanted to do something about it. So I was okay, let me further my degree and get a master's. So I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And during my master's, I would often say that, my long-term goal is to start my own practice at home, right? Yeah. I thought this would happen maybe 10, 20 years into my career, an expat, I'll come back and it's let me give back to the community. Exactly. But God had different plans. Yeah. I started EBIO in 2021. And that was a huge transition in my life. I moved back to Lagos and it wasn't planned at all. In fact, I got my ticket 2 weeks before. Yeah. So it wasn't planned. My life was pretty much upended. Yeah. And then my sister suggested why don't you start, seeing clients? And I was absolutely not. I'm very unsettled. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but God had other plans. And I started EBIO in October 2021. So we're currently in our 4th year and it's been an amazing journey. I mean, we've grown to a team of 3 other therapists and we have support team as well, admin. And it's just been very, very amazing to see the growth and to witness the growth as well.
That's really beautiful. Could you tell us the secret behind the name?
Yeah. Okay. So after my sister said, "Oh, why don't you start seeing clients?" And I, later on decided, okay, maybe I should. I started to think of names, and I knew that I wanted something that embodied joy, that embodied what I wanted clients to feel, which is warmth, connection, safety, and, just joy. And so I didn't want an English name. So I started to just play around with different names. One name that I considered was Eniayo, so person of joy. And, I was telling my brother, so see, my siblings played a big role in this. I was talking to my brother about it, and he was like, why don't you consider Ibiayo, like place of joy? And I was like, that's it.
That's the name.
And yeah, it's stuck. And I can't think of any other name. Like, it signifies what I want clients to experience. And even beyond clients, even like my team, right? The people that come and just encounter us. So whether you're a client, whether you're a team member, I want it to be a place of joy, a place that brings out the best in you and just like helps you navigate life in the way that life ought to be navigated.
Okay. So I love good origin stories. I love when the name is tied to something because it shows that it's coming from a place of actual intentionality. You are very intentional about what you are doing, and you knew what you were going to do before you started. You saw the end in mind and you were walking with it. So thank you so much for starting it.
Thanks. Thanks for thanking me.
Of course, we have to support our women that are doing fantastic on their own lane. So they're right here. So let's move on. Let's focus on what you do, in EBIO, which is psychotherapy. Yeah. So how can women begin to recognize, identify, and acknowledge past traumas that may be buried or mashed? Because we live in a world where people brush a lot of things off. We live in a world where people might actually go through something right now and they just expect you to get over it, move on. They don't know how exactly you can recover from that. And then it piles up and then it's projected in other places, So how can women really, recognize something that maybe happened to them in the past and is actually affecting them? How are they able to identify those kind of traumas?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So I'll start by defining what trauma is. So trauma is an emotional response to an experience, right?
Yeah.
So if you notice, I didn't describe the experience because what you might deem as traumatic or what your experience might be as traumatic may not be my experience as traumatic. So it's very person specific, right? So that said experience usually impacts how we cope with life, usually impacts how we navigate life, right? So trauma is an emotional response to an experience. Now, this experience impacts how our bodies and our mind processes things, right? And like I said, it impacts our ability to cope. So like you rightly said, a lot of people might have an experience and then there's the expectation either from society or even from themselves to just like move on with it, right? But the thing is, our bodies remember and our minds and our brains remember. Right. So one way that you might start to see like an unaddressed trauma coming to the surface is if you are having like a disproportionate reaction to a situation. Right. So let's take, for example, like we live in Lagos, right? Lagos is stressful. And let's say, somebody is driving recklessly and just like, swerves you in the lane, something along the sides of traffic, right? That is typical for Lagos, right? So if somebody has an unaddressed trauma, right, they may feel extra heightened. So let's say, they want to start yelling at, I don't know, the conductor, right? That might feel proportionate to some people, but to another person, they may feel very dysregulated. They might start shouting. They might lose their cool. Even after it's over, they still feel very on edge and like they are boiling on the inside, right? So that might indicate that, okay, there might be something that's unaddressed, right? So that's one example. Another example would be in relationships, because relationships are typically where we experience the most trauma, and they're usually what trigger our trauma. So you're getting to know somebody, you're getting to know a guy and, he says something and then you just flip.
Yeah.
And you're just like, whoa, 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 like what's going on? I didn't mean it like that exactly. And you are just like flipping and, or you might even be frozen, which we'll get into. Exactly. So that might be an indication that, okay, there's something going on. So feedback from your experience and your response, or also feedback that other people give you, can show that, okay, maybe this reaction is disproportionate to the situation, and maybe there's something underneath that I either haven't addressed or didn't address entirely.
A woman identifies the trauma, and then you see someone else who doesn't get triggered the way she does. Comparison can start. It might actually lead into a deep black hole.
Absolutely.
Where you've seen someone else and you're beginning to judge yourself, you're beginning to doubt yourself. Instead of looking for help, begin to compare, and that leads to something else, basically, from one end to another. Give us tips on the woman on our own lane who should really just focus on her own lane. Just really just focus on her own lane and not compare herself with someone else.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, with trauma-based or not.
Right. Absolutely. And it's often said that comparison is a thief of joy, right? Yes. Because when you are comparing, I love, the name on her own lane. When you're comparing, you're not on your own lane. Yeah. You're distracted. You're looking to the left, you're looking to the right, all right, instead of focusing on what's ahead. And one way, or one of the concepts that can help with just dealing with comparison and also negative self-talk is self-compassion. Now, when people hear self-compassion, they might think that, oh, it's self-indulgent, it's just giving myself excuses, it's not holding myself accountable. Yeah. But that is not self-compassion. Simply put, self-compassion is responding to yourself like you would a friend or a loved one. How many years ago now? A while back, I used to deal with a lot of like negative self-talk. I still do, but it's under control now. Thanks be to God. But I remember there was a conference at a church I was attending at the time, and one of the speakers, Lisa Bevere, I got to speak to her after the conference, and I was just like talking to her and telling her, and she asked me a question. She was like, if your friend were to talk to you the way you talk to yourself, would you still be friends with them? And my answer was a big fat no. And she was like, why are you talking to yourself that way? Yeah, and that honestly just like shifted things and helped me with understanding self-compassion. Yeah. Right? So self-compassion is responding to yourself like you would a friend. If you won't talk to your friend that way, if you not allow your friend talk to you that way, to look at it, then why are you talking to yourself that way? Right? Going back to self-compassion not being void of accountability, I think back to, some of the closest people in my lives, like my siblings and my closest friends. They hold me accountable. Yes, they do. If I'm out of order, if I'm misbehaving, they correct me. But they never correct me out of my name. They never insult me. They never, put me down, right? So I can hold myself accountable. I can tell myself like, FUNMTO, like that ain't it. What you did was not okay, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm now berating myself and saying you're not good enough. Why can't you be like other people? So self-compassion, and then also reframing comparison, right? So if you're looking to the left, if you're looking to the right, what is it about the other woman that you like? What is it about the other woman that you admire? Right? There might be something within that other woman that you're like, oh, I want to be able to do. I want to be able to, get this for myself. So what are those things that are within your control that you can do, right? So reframing the comparison to like, okay, maybe this is inspiration. Maybe this is trying to pull out something else within me. Maybe I want to work harder. Maybe I want to, if we're thinking of like material things, maybe I want to buy a nice bag, maybe I want some new clothes. Right? And so what can I do about it? Do I need to save up? Do I need to ask somebody to help me? Do I need to ask God? Do you understand? Work on my finances? Like, what do I need to do? So self-compassion, reframing comparison to inspiration can really just help with dealing with, those negative self-talk and help you with focusing, on your own lane. So that way, if I see somebody and I've reframed that comparison to inspiration, and I see somebody that I like their outfit, I'm able to say, oh my God, I love your outfit. Where did you get it from?
Yes.
Versus like, see you just won't look nice. See her, she looks so much better than you. Right? I'm able to acknowledge that, okay, yeah, she does look nice, and celebrate that. And if I want it from myself, I would ask, where'd you get it from? And take action accordingly.
I think that was a very, very beautiful way you switched it from comparison to inspiration.
Yeah.
So instead of comparing yourself, you're inspired by what she's doing. You're celebrating her as well, because she's doing a fantastic job, and you see that she's doing a fantastic job, then you would celebrate her. And when you are also doing a fantastic job, you will also be celebrated as well. So it's like a pattern or a cycle of beauty and just compliments and, just living life as it should be.
Yeah.
Basically. So thank you so much for that. Of course. So I know this is a topic that you're very, very, and your zone of genius, which is trauma.
Yeah.
So can you just take us through the different types of trauma? Can you walk us through it? Can you walk us through the responses? We're talking about it earlier, before the fight or flight, response, which a lot of people know fight or flight. Yeah, they may not necessarily know what triggers fight or flight and everything. So can you just go through the types of trauma, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and then how these responses might manifest in a woman's life?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to the definition of trauma being an emotional response to a situation. So those 4 responses are that response, right? How the response shows up. So we have fight, which is attacking if we're using the example of an aggressor, for example, right? So fights would look like attacking the aggressor. Flights would look like avoiding, going away. Freeze would look like, as the word implies, being frozen, deer in the headlights, being stuck. And then fawn would look like poor boundaries, people pleasing. So what that can look like in a woman's life, fights can look like aggression. It can look like disproportionate anger, right? It can look like yelling, shouting, things like that, right? Flights can look like avoidance. So avoiding tough conversations, keeping yourself busy, right? In an effort to avoid something. Exactly. Perfectionism, right? Yes, can look like flight, because you're becoming preoccupied with something else rather than dealing with or addressing the other thing that might actually be bothering you, right? And then freeze would look like being stuck. So maybe mindlessly scrolling, just kind of being in a brain fog, having difficulty making decisions, just being stuck, right? And then fawn would look like people pleasing, poor boundaries. Fawn tends to happen a lot with people that unfortunately have experienced abuse, because in order to keep themselves safe, maybe they had to please the abuser, right? So, just having poor boundaries, not being able to say no, putting other people before you at the detriment of yourself, keyword at the detriment of yourself, right? Because you think that, oh, if I tell this person no, then they're going to go away from me. It's going to end the relationship. So let me just say yes. So you can see how that's poor boundaries as people pleasing. So that's what those 4 responses can look like. And something to note is that these responses, it's not like it's an on and off switch, the way I can switch this mic on and off. It's not like that. It's a biological response, right? So you often don't pre-plan what your response is. Actually, you can't do that. You can't be in a situation and then say, okay, so now I'm going to, fight. I'm going to flight. I'm going to freeze. It's just what happens, immediately, or what happens like biologically. So I can give an example if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
So a few years ago, unfortunately, I experienced an attempted robbery. So someone broke into the house that I was staying in at the time, and they turned on the lights, and that was what woke me up. And out of nowhere, I don't know where it came from, but out of nowhere, I like ran towards the person. And like I shouted Jesus. I shouted Jesus and like ran towards the person.
The person be like,
do you understand? He ran out. But like I didn't think about it. It was just innate response. It was just what happened. And like, I didn't think to myself, like, okay, now FUNMTO, you're going to run. It was just what happened immediately, right? And so that was the fight response coming out, right?
Right.
Flights would have looked like trying to run away from the situation, trying to run away from the person,
Yeah.
right? Freeze would have looked like maybe just being stuck in the bed, like, oh my God, or, just something like that. And then fawn would have looked like begging, like, okay, please, take what you want. Just take what you want to take, So like I said, their biological responses, you don't really think about it. It's like whenever I narrate this story, like people always have the reaction that you did, like, wow, because I didn't think about it, right? And in hindsight too, I mean, it was dangerous because like I don't know what weapons he had on him, if any, right? So that's what I mean by like it's a biological response and we don't often think about it. It just kind of happens.
Wow. Okay. Definitely. I don't know what kind of response I have, because now that I'm having this discussion with you, I'm gonna have to take note and become more self-conscious and self-aware of if I am. Because do you feel like everyone has that? Are we trying to say that everyone has that in them? Their response to a problem or a situation is either fight, flight, fawn, or freeze.
Yeah, so it can look like any of those, right? And I like that you said the response to a problem or situation, because sometimes the problem or situation might be stress.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Sure.
So I've noticed that when I'm stressed sometimes, I just freeze. It's very easy for me to just scroll mindlessly and just lie down and, say, oh, I'll come back to you, or like, just avoid. And even sometimes, if I can also procrastinate, which can sometimes look like flight, right? Because it's avoiding what I have to do. So everyone has one form or may respond in one way or the other. It just depends on the situation. It also depends on, the person and like the level of self-awareness. So you might not know that you are, mindlessly scrolling or you're avoiding something. But hopefully as you grow in self-awareness and as you gain self-awareness, or even somebody else calls it to your attention, then you're able to just take action accordingly.
It's very important. And honestly, I would love to still point out, I can't get over the fact that you said, when you're talking, when you have that negative talk in your head, think about how a friend would talk to you. I think it will also make you look at your friends differently too. Like, you wouldn't talk to me like that. Why would I? And then when I'm responding to something, next time something happens, I don't pray anything bad happens. It will be very good to know, honestly, what kind of response a person has, because we see these things and we say, oh, okay, this person is bursting out or this person is running away. And then we don't think it is actually a response that they don't even know that they actually have. So thank you so much for sharing that and bringing that knowledge and insight to the podcast. We appreciate that. Yeah. So let's move on to red flags.
Okay.
We talked about this. Red flags. What are some common signs that a woman may need to seek support for trauma? And how can she distinguish between normal stress, like you said, if you're stressed, you're just strolling, and then trauma-related distress? Because we're in Lagos.
Yes, we are.
Every day you go through stress, one stress or the other, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's trauma-related.
No.
So there's trauma-induced stress, and then there's Lagos, life-induced stress. Life-induced stress. There's this world-induced stress. So how are we able to differentiate and just ensure that when we actually notice that we have the trauma-induced stress, we would be able to take note of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very important question because, like you said, there's trauma-induced stress and there's life-induced stress, right? Life can be stressful.
Yes, it can.
And one key thing is, I would say, I said it earlier, but just disproportionate responses, right? So if you feel like this response is bigger than the situation or somebody else, maybe trusted loved one. I keep going back to trusted loved one, right? Because those are the people that are typically able to point out things in you with gentleness, with love, with accountability, and you're typically able to receive it better. So if a trusted loved one, points something out to you that maybe this is disproportionate, that's how you might know that, okay, this might be something bigger than life-induced stress. Another way is, just if it starts to interfere with your daily functioning. So some things would look like anxiety, right? Just feeling on edge, constantly on edge, not being able to say why you're on edge or point to why you're on edge or what may be bringing up that like feeling of uneasiness or anxiety. Irritability, right? I mean, us ladies, we know that we can get very irritable and snappy. If that is continuous, or you're getting feedback that is happening continuously, that may be an indication that something else is going on. And then we also have like physical symptoms. So headaches, unexplained headaches.
Really?
Unexplained headaches, getting sick unexplainably, right? We have like chronic illnesses. In fact, there's been research done to like chronic illnesses like lupus and things like that, to even just like trauma and stress, right? So if you think of somebody that maybe every 2 business days they have malaria, they are constantly falling sick. Sure, they may have a weakened immune system, but there might also be something else going on underneath. I was actually having a chat with a doctor recently, and she was saying how sometimes she sees patients and she's like, they run all the tests and they can't find anything wrong. And she's like, this is just an emotional thing, right? This might just be trauma. So that's another way, right? And then anger, like I said, just having those anger outbursts. Now, if all those things start to interfere with your daily functioning, so maybe with the anxiety, you're unable to focus, right? You're losing interest in activities that you once were able to engage in. You're having difficulty doing things that were easier for you, or like that you will kind of breeze through. That might be an indicator that there's something else going on, right? And that something else could be trauma, but you won't know unless you dig deeper, unless you explore, and maybe even seek professional help. So those are the red flags that I would say. And oftentimes we can joke like, oh, is it red? Is it pink? What color is it? What color is the flag? So when I would say that is definitely a red flag is if it's been happening persistently. So think like 2+ weeks. If you're noticing it within yourself, people are also giving you feedback, trusted people are giving you feedback, then I would say, okay, yeah, you should for sure seek professional help. If the flag is looking pink, if you're thinking like, maybe something is up, then definitely still seek help, right? Because it's better. I mean, we always say prevention is better than cure.
Yes.
So it's better to seek help and find out that, okay, it's not as intense versus coming in its most heightened state. And then all the focus is now on that and, helping you come back to baseline and being regulated.
So you actually answered the next question. It's okay. That means that the conversation is flowing and it's coming out well.
Yeah.
I know, because we were about to ask when do you know you should actually seek for help?
Yeah.
What are the triggers and what are responses? And you said if it's continuous, if it's just something out of the ordinary, And I think it just boils down to us being self-aware.
Absolutely.
People need to be more self-aware.
1,000%. 1,000%. People need to be more self-aware. We need to pay more attention to ourselves. We need to pay more attention to our bodies and how our bodies respond to certain things, because our bodies are constantly giving us feedback. We just need to listen. And the thing is, we don't always listen. Oftentimes we ignore what our bodies are saying, right? Even beyond like emotional issues, like think physical things, right? Some people may not know that they have certain sensitivities to food, to certain food groups, right? Or certain food types. But if they were to be more mindful and pay more attention to their body, then they'll be able to tell, right? I recently, I don't want to say discovered, but accepted that I can have a sensitivity to pepper, right? I know my Yoruba self is like, what's going on? Like, why you?
Is like,
Do you understand? It's like, why you doing this? Why you disgracing me? No, honestly, because I started to think back about when I was younger.
Okay.
When I was younger, whenever I had to, I didn't used to like stew.
Wow.
I used to eat rice and butter.
Wow.
And then gradually I started eating stew.
Okay.
But then I would always rinse the meat, right? I would like, if the meat has stew on it, I would rinse it and I would eat it last.
Wow.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden I became obsessed with stew. I would always have a lot of stew. But then I started paying more attention that sometimes whenever I eat something that's very spicy, my stomach, the way is on fire and the way it's just unsettled and I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel good. I don't feel good afterwards, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm more attentive. So now I know that, okay, if I'm going to have something very spicy, like if I'm going to have like, I don't know, pepper, like fatty jollof, for example. Now when I just prepare myself that we'll deal with the consequences later.
Enjoy
Like, it's too sweet. It's too sweet. But now I know, right? So if I'm making my meals myself, I try to, just be mindful of the amount of pepper, or even sometimes it's even the tomato, right? The tomato might be too acidic. So making sure that like I'm balancing it out and, like the tomato is good and things like that. But that's just an example to paying attention to your body, right? I'm sure that there are some other people that are probably going to listen to this and be like, yeah, me too. I've noticed that whenever, exactly. And they might just think that, oh, it's regular, but it's not regular. Yeah. So we need to pay attention to our bodies. We need to pay attention to our minds, right? How do I feel around certain people? How do I feel in certain situations? How do I respond in certain situations? And those things can really help with self-awareness. And going back to trusted people, feedback is very important because there is a blind self. There are things that people can see that you can't see. I mean, an example would be us, right? Before we got on, you told me there was lipstick on my teeth.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, right? So that was a blind spot.
Yeah.
So there are things that other people can see that you can't see. And so it's important that we become receptive to feedback, right? It may not always feel good at the time, but feedback is great and it's important to even help with self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because now that you pointed that out, I'm going to be mindful, right? If somebody points out something that I'm not aware of, now that's information that I can become aware of.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, that was actually a very good, example that you use just to be, because honestly, I feel like we still need to have like another session of this self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because it is something that people really need to know about themselves. Okay. Because you have to question yourself. I think it's just the ability to be able to question yourself about situations.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to point out that sometimes, when I started becoming more self-aware, it now became, I can be very critical.
Yes. So I was going to say this is where good self-compassion still has to exist, right? Because you can't have self-awareness without self-compassion.
Okay.
Because self-awareness can then easily become you putting yourself down and negative self-talk, which then brings us back to, if a friend were to talk to you in that way, how would you respond? Would you talk to your friend in that way? Right? You pointed out that I had lipstick on my teeth. You didn't start saying, oh, FUNMTO, your makeup is ugly. Right? That might seem like an extreme situation.
But in our minds.
But in our minds, that's how we can process certain things. Like, oh, something has been pointed out to me. I've realized something about myself. So therefore, I'm bad. No, you're not. So therefore, I'm not good enough. No, that's not true, right? So therefore, this is an area that I need to improve in, right? We're talking to Christian women. So this is an area that I need to submit to the Lord. This is an area that I need the assistance of the Holy Spirit, right? I mean, one of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 139, verse 23. Search me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any way offensive in me and lead me in the path everlasting. So there might be things that the Holy Spirit is going to show you. There might be things that the Holy Spirit Spirit will show you through other people. Now, it doesn't mean that you're no longer a woman in Christ. It doesn't mean that you are no longer, the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. It just means that, okay, this is another way, another opportunity for you to receive the love of God. There's another opportunity for you to, ask for help, receive his help, right? So just because something is pointed out in you doesn't mean that it then takes away from your worth or your identity or who you are as a person.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. Thank you so much
for
that. That was actually beautifully said. And a beautiful way to also wrap up is you have pointed out so much and we've gotten so many nuggets from you, but we want to know, what exactly does success look like to you? What does it mean to you?
I would say success looks like for me in being all that God has called me to be.
Okay.
Right? One of the things that I prayed for this year and also last was for God to just bring out all the gifts within me that I didn't know existed. Okay. And I mean, God listens and he responds.
Well.
And so I started feeling like my capacity was being stretched. Okay. And it was very uncomfortable. And I remember talking to my sister about it. I was like, Amber, you prayed for it now.
You asked for it.
Like, you're the one that used your mouth to say it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, success would look like being all that God has called me to be, walking in my own lane, right? Yeah. And also just being focused on him. Success looks like joy to me. Like, joy is very important to me, not just because I named my company ABIR, but joy is very important to me. Success looks like being an inspiration, but not that, I'm putting it in my head that, I want to become an inspiration. Okay. But I'm so focused on what God has called me to be. And in that focus, it's then inspiring other people. So my mindset is not, let me become an inspiration. My mindset is like, let me do what God has called me to be. And while I'm doing that, I'm being the light, I'm being the salt. And so therefore, other people are inspired. So yeah, I'd say that's what success looks like for me.
That's a good definition. That's a good one. And it'll be a good way for us to wrap this up. We discussed questions that community would ask, and we went through a few questions, and you seem to gravitate towards ghosting in relationships because it can also be trauma induced.
Absolutely.
Well. So avoidance, ghosting in relationships, maybe in family relationships, in actual, male and female relationships, or in friendships, which is very, 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 very common, especially female friendships where you've had friends for a very long time and all of a sudden things just happen, maybe distance or life in general happens. How can a woman actually just ensure that she's taking care of herself and she is also very responsive to any trauma triggers that happens because these things happen.
Yeah, they do happen.
Anyone, it can happen at any time.
Yeah.
So how can someone cope with when they're being ghosted in a relationship or when a relationship comes to an end? Are we going there?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're ready to go there. That's a whole episode, though.
We're going to.
Yeah, we are. And I think especially with female friendships, right? Because when we get into romantic relationships, male and female, I mean, oftentimes we're not thinking that, it's going to end, but we know that there's a possibility.
Yeah, there's a possibility.
But when we go into a friendship, we don't think about an end. We think that this is my person. Yeah. This is my girl for life.
Yeah.
I found my person. Yeah. So when there now becomes to be a shift or a change, I believe that it hurts even more than a breakup, than a romantic breakup.
Yeah.
Because you have so many unexplained questions, so much hurt. Some, like, if a female friendship, a close female friendship, it's integrated in your life so much. So to now be like forced to pull apart, it can bring up so many thoughts. Yeah, it's a lot, right?
It's a lot.
So how to deal with when a relationship comes to an end, or let's even start with ghosting, right? So ghosting, ghosting is never an appropriate response. Ghosting doesn't feel good. You won't want to be ghosted. So please, let's not ghost other people. Right? Like, let me look at the camera. Please don't ghost people.
Yeah.
Right? Ghosting might feel like the easier thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Learning.
you caught on.
I did.
Exactly. Ghosting is flight, it's avoidance. Right? So you can, if a conversation needs to be had, have it.
Yeah.
Right? Even if the person is not receptive or open, but don't ghost people. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Right? So now, with friendships, female friendships, if the dynamic is changing, I think this is where awareness comes in and honesty.
Okay.
Right? And even vulnerability. So if you feel like, me and my friend, we used to talk every single day, but now we're not talking as much, say something to your friend. Name it. Because what tends to happen is we don't say anything. Our behaviors will now start changing. And then that even strains the relationship more than what was actually going on. Say something, be vulnerable, right? Tell your friend like, hey, I'm feeling XYZ. This is what my experience is like. Can you help me make sense of it? So when you're saying something, it's important that we're not pointing fingers. We're not saying, oh, you do this, you don't call me, you don't check on me, you don't do this. It's important to just say, this is what I feel like, and then leave it to the other person to help you make sense of it. Now, the other person may not be receptive to that conversation, which is another thing to deal with, but at least you've been honest. You didn't make an assumption, right? So you said something. If, it then turns out that, okay, the friendship is changing, right? What are where the friendship exists? What I mean by that is if you guys used to kiki every day, but now you talk on the phone once a month, be intentional about that once a month, right? Be intentional about that once a quarter. Just what are where it exists. And then finally, if the friendship has come to an end, right?
Yeah.
It's painful, but you need to accept it.
Yeah.
You need to accept it. So cry if you need to, journal if you need to. If it's possible to have a conversation, right? Again, I said if it's possible, because a conversation is between two people. So the other person may not be receptive to a conversation, and you're just going to have to accept it, right? And now that acceptance can be painful. It is going to be painful, not can be. It's going to be painful, but you can't avoid it, right? So just accept it, cry if you need to, mourn the friendship, grieve the friendship. But don't let that cloud your perception about friendships, right? So just accept where it's at, accept where it has gotten to, if it has come to an end. But don't jump to acceptance. Notice I said acceptance last too. Don't jump to acceptance based off of an assumption, right? So it is our responsibility to have a conversation if it is possible and say something. Right? So oftentimes we jump to acceptance based off assumption, right? And the other person is just like, wait now, what's going on? Exactly. Right? So communicating, vulnerability, being intentional, what are where it exists, right? And then acceptance.
So you'll have tried all you can, and then you accept what you can't control. Yeah.
That is a perfect summary.
Great. And whatever you can and accept what you cannot control. Yeah, because that's life.
It is
life.
Yeah, and sometimes it sucks, but
you have to deal with it. You have to deal with it. So thank you so much, FUNMTO.
Of course,
it has flown by. I've learned
I
so
know.
much. I've learned so much. You got my nugget there when I put
I did. You are. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here today. It was an honor and pleasure having this discussion with you. We're definitely going to have to call you back.
Please do.
I feel like that last question, we still need to dig.
We need to dive in.
Dive in and, peel some onions, like layers back. So we'd definitely love to have you again.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Joining in today. If you have 1 or 2 things that you learned, please drop it in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to share. Bye for now. Don't stop walking on your own lane.